we're gonna do a little bit of fun stuff at this stage. Hi, I'm Angela Fehr. 7 years ago, I was painting during my kids' nap time, and I had this light bulb moment. I saw my watercolor paint doing something that suddenly made sense, and I wanted to show somebody else. And that was the day I put my first video on YouTube. Sharing those light bulb moments was kind of a sanity saver when my kids were very little, but it actually grew into a career. And now, 7 years later, I get to teach students all over the world. I get to travel. I get to work with amazing brands and just share what I'm learning and continuing to learn as a watercolor lover. It's an incredible honor, and I'm so thankful for YouTube and all the viewers who have supported my channel, many of you from the very beginning. It's just sensational. Thank you so much. Today I want to paint just for the love of painting. I've been doing a lot of teaching lately, and when I teach, it's hard to paint just for fun. So we're gonna pull out the paper, pull out a reference photo, and just paint something to please me. I found this beautiful photo, just a local landscape from my home here in northern British Columbia. So as I paint, I want to talk about why abstracting the landscape, making a landscape reveal my own personal style is so important to me. And I'll be sharing some suggestions for you as you work to develop your own personal style and show yourself in your paintings. Let's go paint. I'm not going to be talking about the how-to as much in this video as just the journey that it is to develop a painting. When you start painting a scene, I think we have this misconception that the first version is going to be the only version we need to do. And we get this, I don't know why we perpetuate this idea. Maybe it is because artists so rarely show their process. And it's getting so there's more transparency about stuff like that, I think, because we have the internet, we have this idea that you create a work in progress, and there are stages to that development. But even then, it seems like we see the progress, the work in progress is still just one detail added to the next detail, and it all works out to a marvelous painting every time. And for me, as a loose painter, I can't be very structured in how I develop a scene, because I want my own personal expression needs to be a big part of what I'm revealing in my painting. And I can't do that unless I actually know what I want my painting to say, and that takes time. I very rarely have perfect insight into what my painting needs to be about. So I'm using a reference photo today, but I want to keep it nice and loose. And I also want to recognize that because it's the first time I've painted this scene, it's probably not going to be the only time, and it's probably not going to be flawless. And that is okay. That is all part of the process, and I get to recognize that. Now, if you want to paint a perfect painting every time, you're going to need to paint with a lot of control, and you're going to have to redefine your expectation of what perfection is, because everything still is going to go a little bit, it just always seems like it can't go completely to plan. But I have noticed that if you're painting with a lot of realism, if you have a really good pencil sketch, you might actually be able to stay on task and get your painting looking like the reference photo. But I don't want my painting to look like my reference photo, and I think that's the other problem that I have. I'm a loose painter. I want to rather than showing just this is what this place looked like, this is what this time of day looked like, I want to say this is how it feels. This is how it feels to be standing there looking out over that scene. This is, you know, this is how I feel about this place that I visited, and the experience that I had there. And when I can share that, my emotions, that's when I feel like my painting has succeeded. And so that means the painting needs to make me feel a certain way. And it's much more about my feelings than about the result. It seems like the first time you paint something, you're going to get cliche. You're going to show us what it looks like. In order to get into how it feels, that's where you have to dig a little deeper, explore and experiment. And that's what I have opportunity to do every time I repaint a scene. So I've stopped looking at the need to redo paintings as a failure. They're really not. They're my opportunity to get closer to the heart of my painting, of my subject, to really show who I am in my work. And that's the other part of it. My artistic integrity says I want to create art that makes me feel a certain way before I can release it out into the world. Right now I'm just looking at my sunset picture and looking at my painting, pulling back and giving myself enough room to kind of evaluate it. And I'm kind of happy with how it's going so far. I feel like I could build up a few more darks. There's like a darker cloud right in here. And there's also some kind of muddy neutrals where we get some shadow that's not as bright. So by adding a hint of orangey color, I think I can make this little darker puddle that might look like that neutrally tone that I want to get. It's a little bit greenish. So maybe I'll add a bit of pink to it to make it a little more of a gray violet. That's better. Really paying attention to the darks and lights in order to create those contrasts. As a loose painter, I've learned that I look for the overall shape, the overall feeling. It's not about how all the individual elements are going, but how does it look as a whole? How does it make me feel? I'm working on a landscape course right now that I'll be doing with my online students. You can be one of them if you'd like. We'll be starting in June of 2019. You can check out learn.angelafehr.com for more information on the Next Level Landscape series. We'll be painting, I have actually two courses. I have Creating Simple Landscapes, which is my beginner landscape course, and now Next Level Landscapes, which will be opening up in June. And I'm working to mix color and not getting the shade I want. So I get to play mad scientist here a little bit and just work back and forth until I get the green I want to get. That one is a little bit too something, or not enough of something else. Let's try adding that murky yellow. That might work for some of my landscape down below here. One of the charms of loose painting is being able to paint most of your painting in the first layer. When you get a first layer that works really well, then you get to work and build on that. And so I'm feeling happy with that. I want some muted colors because when you have a bright sun or a bright sky, it's not a sunset really. Well, it is actually starting to be sunset. I think it's the last of the sunset. So the light's getting quite dark down below here. So we want a muted, that's not muted. So I tweak it. Muted blue greens. And I'm going to to take a risk right now and poke up some bushes up in the corner to see if I can get a nice soft flow right over here. Maybe over here too. I'm gonna remove my white spaces down below here. And then from there, I'm going to move back up and work at my horizon line. Let's see if we can't get some distant hills maybe. I might need to go to a smaller brush in a minute. So that just blurred my horizon quite a bit. It's hard to tell what's what. I'm going to move to a smaller brush, just one with a finer point. And we're going to place some darkest value darks using a near black green. And we're going to place that into, see, I'm teaching again. I'm going to place that into my original wash. What I'm looking for right now as I paint, I have the sky almost the way I want it. I might go back in and add some detail later. There's a really beautiful little watermark here that I'm enjoying. I'm glad I didn't panic and blot it. I'm seeing some of those streaks in the sky, the crepuscular rays, but they're not they're not too dominant. I probably could have made them even stronger, but I'm kind of glad they're softened. That adds to the contrast in the clouds. Darkest contrast is what tells your eye where to go in the painting. So my eye goes to that white spot really quickly, and then hopefully it comes back down, follows some of the darks before it moves back to that strongest vibrant spot. There's a part of me that wants to add purple to my painting. When I have that urge, I don't question it, I listen. And I love that that's really the definition of artistic license, is doing that what your inner artist tells you to do. That's one of the focuses of my online classes when I'm teaching students in a workshop or online. It's all about learning how to listen to your intuition and to pair that, harmonize that with our desire for creating a scene that looks like something. Usually we want our viewers to understand what we're painting, while also showing who we are in our work. So painting is really finding your voice as an artist, and your personal style is looking for that blend of who you are with what you want to show people. And the more vulnerable we're able to be as we show who we are in our art, the more people are going to respond to your work. So that means at a certain point, I put my reference photo away and I look at what my intuition tells me that the painting needs. And right now my intuition is telling me to put some stuff in the foreground, just some line to add some shape and contour there. And I think I can go right up. I've been reading The Artist's Journey by Nancy Hillis. It's a book I highly recommend. And in the book, Nancy talks about the adjacent possible, that as you paint, every decision you make gives you the opportunity for new possibilities in your painting. So if I'm placing these brush strokes here, how do they influence the brush strokes I might make over here? And seeing the painting as this smorgasbord of possibilities, and with new possibilities emerging. That means I need to pause and pay attention to what's happening in my painting. I need to pull back, and instead of just focusing on this area, I look at how is my whole painting coming together? What do I need to look for and add, how can I be awakened and attentive to the new possibilities that emerge as my painting evolves? And this is a fairly dry area. It's creating some really beautiful line with my dark marks on this very pointy dagger striper brush. The addition of this crisp line in the foreground is a really nice complement to what's happening in the background. My reference photo did tell me there were bushes here, but if I was painting them just like the picture, I think I'd be missing out on the magic of being able to add my individual style. So that I think is a very big part of painting with your intuition. Learning what feels good, what you enjoy doing. I love making funny little marks. And then finding opportunities to place that individual self-expression into your work. I'm really liking the contrast of violet and green there as well. Look at how your eye goes right to that area of the painting. I'm at the place where it's a really good time to evaluate. There's stuff in my photo I'm not putting in because I want to make a strong painting, and a strong painting doesn't have to include everything in your scene. There are possibilities, there are things I could add, and I'm not sure if I need to, and I'm not sure if I will. I need perspective. I need to take the time to pause and reflect on what's happening and what I want to change and add. I want a painting that makes me feel a certain way. I want a painting that feels a certain way as I'm painting it. I find that the mood and the emotions I have as I paint very much show up in my painting. So I want to continue this painting in the same mindset, with the same feeling as I did when I started it. I want to place a little hill here, but I also don't want to cover up my wonderful bush. So I'm going to try to place it here. Oh, we're going to drag it through the bush as well. It might smudge some of my lines, but I can come back in and touch those up after everything's dry. I think it's worth the risk. Now we have this beautiful continuous shape that gives us that distant hill and gives us a feeling of distance. Debating whether some darks in here would help as well. Symbolizing those dark trees off in the distance. In painting, everything is a symbol. We're never actually making trees, hills, skies. We're just making pictures of them, so we're symbolizing everything. And that gives us the freedom to simplify. To develop our individual style. With different techniques for handling different elements in the painting. Yes. Okay, time to pause. Let it dry. Look at something else for a while and then come back and evaluate. See how I feel about this painting and how it's evolved. I love that it's been able to happen. I have a scene, a very recognizable scene that's happened in one layer. If this painting needs more, and I will wait until I know for sure before I touch it with the brush again. If this painting needs more, it needs very little more. The more layers that you put on the painting, the less painting you should actually be doing when you go into those layers. It shouldn't be necessary to cover an equal amount of square footage in future successions of the painting. Every time you paint, your area of actually being painted on should be smaller. Your paint quantity and the amount of water you use, you should be using a greater paint quantity and less water as you build up those details and your darks, as a general rule of thumb. We're going to go back to the painting in just a minute. We're letting it dry. And while we're doing that, I wanted to talk about why and how I might abstract my landscape scene. I'm using the word abstracting the landscape just to refer to that process of editing, putting your own artistic license on the scene, making it your own. Abstract can mean semi-representational. It can mean completely no relation to the original image, except for maybe that imagined theme or shape, line, whatever. So you have this huge range of possibilities that happens when you start to think about loosening up and not just showing what the photo shows. So I have a stack of notes here from a recent workshop, and I want to just go over them really quickly. We don't have time to do them justice, and so I would encourage you to join my upcoming Next Level Landscape course, which will be starting June 1st, and I've got information on that down below the video. Why would we abstract a landscape? Why don't we just paint exactly what we see? And our goal here is twofold. One is that we love painting, so something in us is motivated to capture the scene. When we see something beautiful, we want to get it down on paper or just express ourselves in some way. That's a great reason to be painting, and if you don't have that reason, then why are you painting? And number two is that we want to express ourselves. And in painting a landscape, we get the opportunity to show our point of view, to show our experience, our feelings about a place, and the memories attached to it. I can show somebody a photograph of somewhere, but that doesn't tell them how it made me feel. And so in painting, we get to take it one step further. We get to say, this is my experience. We get freedom. It's not just about the reference photo. We get to recognize that a reference photo is just a tool. I feel like abstract painting is our opportunity to show a commitment to authenticity. How I paint a scene is going to look different than how you would paint it. So we show who we are in our work. Really, where an abstract painting comes from, if you're abstracting the landscape, you're asking yourself, who am I? And how am I showing myself in my work? So those are just a few things to think about as you work on being a looser landscape painter. We're going to go over those in so much more depth in Next Level Landscapes. I really hope you'll join us. It's so much fun to be able to put yourself into your paintings. And when you show a painting that has your heart in it and someone connects with that, it is just the greatest honor of all. Let's take one last look at my landscape painting, see what it needs, if it needs anything, evaluate where it's working and where I might change or improve in the future version. We're going to do a little bit of fun stuff at this stage. Remember I said I'm only going to do the bare minimum. I don't want to overdo it here. But I'm going to choose, try to make some opaque color to play with. And opacity comes from the semi-transparent colors. Yeah, I've got this Mars yellow here that I really like, and I think by using that as my light value color, I'm going to add a tiny bit of white to it, I think. I'm just going to use a little bit of white gouache and add that in here, and that's going to lighten my value even more. And with that light value, I can put a little bit of light value up here in the foreground. The opacity, it's not just about light value, because then I could have just left white spaces, but the opacity as well creates kind of these exclamation marks of line and interesting color. So it might work, might not. Story of my life. Every painting is a series of experiments. Learning how to get closer to what you want to say. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the darks and place a few more. And the reason I want to go back to my darkest values is because some of them did get blurred out just a little more than I would like. I think contrast is created by dark versus light. It's also created by hard versus soft. So having crisp lines in the painting will bring your eye right to anywhere you've got edges in your painting, crisp edges, you'll bring your eye right to that part of the scene. So here in this painting, we have a crisp edge here, and look at how it guides the eye right across the painting. And we also have an edge here, which moves the eye towards this cloud, which is also framed by crisp edges. And even these little streaks of light value actually guide the eye and create edges. So edges aren't always super hard. Sometimes they are a lot of softness, but it's just what they're surrounding, where they're placed in the painting that has that impact. And that means I can choose, even these little brush marks that I'm making right now, can direct the eye through the painting. So I need to think very intentionally about how they are moving on the page. They could all, notice how they curve up and this way. If they were curving up and this way, they'd actually move the eye till you were looking out of the painting. But you can think of them like little fingers pointing your viewer to where you want them to look. And we know that there's contrast here and lots of crisp edges, so they're going to be looking there anyhow. So then we think about, where do they look next? And we think, well, they go to the sky, then maybe their eye comes back to here, and then this line also guides them over to this area, but then we come back to here again. So there's this beautiful movement that kind of follows the darks and the contrasts around the painting, and it's just so much fun to think about how the viewer is going to experience your scene and what you can do to get them to look where you want them to look. And it's really it's the main thing I look for when I go in to evaluate a painting. After I've done that first layer and I've taken my break, I come back and I say, okay, what did I just look at first? Where does my eye feel like it's going? Is there a place where the eye is bouncing back and forth because I have two competing elements? And I look for that, and my painting is influenced on those things. Now, one thing I haven't done at this stage is I haven't looked at my reference photo. If I went back to my reference photo and said, okay, where is it realistic and where is it not realistic enough? Right away I'm getting tied to a photograph, and I would really like to be more influenced by what the painting needs at this stage. I know that if I looked at the photograph, it would be telling me to put more depth in my sky. And I'm just not sure I want to go there. We'll try just a tiny bit. So if I put more dimension, that's not the right color really, in my sky, build up more layers of cloud. That's bringing in some hard edges. So we're aware that that's going to swing the balance of detail and the emphasis back up to the sky again. And it might create further depths in my sky, and that might be very pleasing. In my photograph, and I am looking at it now, there is a strong dark contrasting cloud here that I could build up even darker. And then because it's a cloud, it needs a little bit of softness, so I go back in with a damp brush and just blur a couple of edges. And there's some dark wispy clouds up here. Notice how my brush makes such strong marks, and then I have to go back in and soften before they dry, set into the painting. I want them to feel like clouds. But I feel like if I go too crisp, I'm going to lose some of the beautiful transitions of soft color that I had. And so I'm actually going to chicken out. See, I tested it, and I know how much time I get before things start to dry, so I had the freedom to test the idea. But it could be very possible that in testing this idea, I commit to detail that my painting doesn't need. And in that process, I lose some of the freshness, and I might find myself in the place where I'd want to do a redo. It is okay. Again, it is just fine to do over a painting. And the freedom you get when you do start over, try something new, take the information from this one to make your next painting better. It's really nice because you actually get the opportunity to look for and see growth in your work, to see more competence in your brush handling, to see more assurance and skill, and to see your research from the earlier versions pay off in the future versions. And that, I think, is one of the biggest benefits to painting or repainting a subject. And I'm really having to make sure I soften out all the edges of those clouds that I placed and then decided I didn't like. Because any edge that stays behind is going to really be dominant. And making sure those directional rays are going the right direction. Okay, I'm going to stop. I've wanted to for a while, and then I just wanted to show you a little bit more problem solving. It's almost impossible for me if I'm painting on camera not to turn it into a lesson. I painted this because of the beautiful sky contrasted against the landscape, and I probably could go even darker with my landscape to give that stronger sunset feel, something to try for a future version. There are elements that are working really well. Those add to my toolbox, my body of knowledge to bring to the next painting. I really try, once again, I try to pay attention to the way the eye travels through the scene. That is number one, because I want my viewers to be able to experience this painting in an intentional way. I want it to show who I am in the brush marks, the color choices. I want it to show how I feel about my home and the beauty that I see that I'm surrounded by here. I get to do that in my paintings, and it's so much fun.